Hi everybody, welcome to my third holiday winter themed watercolor tutorial. Today is going to be fun because we are going to do more of a designy kind of painting with a limited color palette, although you can make it as colorful as you want. So what I'm doing now is I'm laying my base layer. I'm using the wet and wet technique. I've wet the shape of a mitten just with plain water, and then I'm dropping in the color for my background. And I'm really just putting the color around the edges here, and I'm letting it bleed out. Now I'm going to work on the second mitten, and you can see that I outline it with the brush with just plain water, and then I fill it in. And then I'm going to drop the color into this one as well. And I'm going to let these fully dry before I come back and add some interesting details on the top. I really like this pretty blue color. It looks really wintry to me. So I like how those two mittens are slightly different looking. And I'm going to leave those guys alone and work on a hat. So I am going to do the base of the hat here, wet it fully. And this hat is going to be interesting because to kind of coordinate with those mittens, I'm going to do the band of it, the blue, and also the pom-pom at the top. So you can see this pom-pom I'm putting right at the top of where I wet it, and so it's bleeding into the top of the hat base, which I think looks really nice. I like that. And now I'm going to add the blue band at the bottom. And these little vertical strokes kind of imitate the knitted fabric of a hat. So that's the bottom band of my hat. And I'm going to leave that to dry because I'm going to add some patterns on the hat. And I don't want the edges of it to be blue. Now I'm going to do a couple little socks, some kind of skinny. I'm thinking these are hand knit socks. I've been a knitter for most of my life, but the one thing I've never made is socks, which is kind of funny because people who are knitters and knit socks, they're kind of like diehards because apparently the socks are so much better. So maybe someday I'll do that. So I'm kind of going for a stockingish look on this one, and just putting the color at the heel and the toe and on the top cuff. Now I'm going to make the little buddy here and tuck it underneath that front sock. Now after I get the color in here to my satisfaction, I'm going to let this layer fully dry, and that's really important for the part that I'm going to do next, because I actually want the details and the colors to stay crisp and separate from each other. So I'm just going to leave this to dry, and I left that for a while. Now I'm back. They're fully dry, and I'm going to pick a couple colors to add the details and the interesting little patterns with. So I'm going to use like a kind of pinky red, and a little bit of darker blue-gray. And I'm just gonna start not thinking too hard about it, just adding little patterns and little details, little stripes and scallops on my mittens. I think I want to add some snowflakes to those mittens too. Let's see if I can do a snowflake on here. So snowflakes always have 6 points, which when I learned that, I thought that was really interesting. And that also explains why the first snowflakes that I drew didn't look quite right, because they would have 8 points. But actually snowflakes have 6 points, so they're, if you think of it like a circle, it's divided into 6 60-degree sections. And I'm just adding the little arrows at the tips of the snowflake. I have a really nice Dover thrift edition of a book of photographs taken of snowflakes, and there are hundreds of them. And I love it as a reference. Sometimes I will paint like a more realistic snowflake, and I love to use that book as a reference. So I'm just going to continue adding these little details. The sock, the top knitted ribs here are going to be this little red color. And there's some stitching around the toes in the red. It's kind of freeing to do a painting with a limited color palette because you can have fun with the little design details. You don't have to think so much about the color. So I'm just going to continue adding details on these. Alright, so now on this hat, this is going to be fun. I want to do some skinny stripes. And this hat is knitted, and so I'm going to do the little V-shaped knit stitch in lines across my hat. And I'm keeping these to just one row of the color to make it look like a skinny stripe. And I'm not making my lines perfectly straight, and the stitches are not the same distance apart, which kind of implies some shape and movement in the hat. You know, like maybe a little fold where the stitches are scrunched up together. It's actually nicer if it's a little imperfect. So I really like how that's looking, and I like how the white of the paper is preserved. You just really get a feeling for the shape of that hat. Okay, so I've got 3 nice wintry woolen items here, and I'm going to fill up the rest of the space with some complementary things. So I'm going to make a mug of some kind of winter drink, maybe hot cocoa. So with this, I'm going to use the same wet and wet technique. I wet the shape of a mug, and this time I'm dropping in a red color for the background. And I'm even going to punch that red up a little bit and use like a magenta color with it. It's not so different that it's distracting, but it just gives a little variation in the color and the value. So there's my mug, and I will add some more details to that once it's dry, just like we did with the knitted items. So let's make a cute little fur collar. I'm kind of imagining, well, since I'm going to make this pink, so I guess it will have to be a faux fur collar. But I'm imagining a vintage looking girl ice skating. She's got her hand knit socks and her mittens, and she's got this cute little fur collar that matches her outfit. So here's my little fur collar, and of course it's going to have to have a little tie-on bow. And I think that looks really cute with the hat and the mittens. So here's the little tie. I'm going to let that dry and see if I want to add any more to it later. So now I've got one more little space to fill up. And I think I will put some kind of food item in here. So I guess when I think of wintry hot cocoa, it's always nice to put a little candy cane in the mug and let it melt. So I'm going to put a candy cane. Now these are really fun to do wet and wet, as long as you can keep yourself from messing with it too much. You just wet the shape of a candy cane, and then you add the stripes, and you kind of curve them out towards the edges, and it implies the shape, the round shape of the candy cane really well. And we'll add a few tiny little, what are those called? Starlight mints. So I just wet a circle, and then I'm doing like a little pinwheel stripe around those. So I'm going to let all of this dry and then come back and add some details over those, just like I did with the hat and mittens and socks. So with a darker color, I'm going to add some details to the little collar. Just putting some little scallops around that top edge. And again, I'm using colors that are in the same color family. So I'm using a darker blue, and I'm using a purple color, which is related to both the magenta red and the blue. Put a couple little pom-poms on the end of her collar. And now I'm going to do some whipped cream on the top of my cocoa. So what I've done is wet kind of like a fluffy triangular shape on the top of my mug. And then with this pale gray color, I just put in a few little lines that kind of imply the round foam that you can put on the top. And I'm going to let that dry fully. I don't want to add too much color to it. And then again on the mug, I think I'll do a little tree. It's always nice to try to vary the little details in your pictures. And if you need ideas, you know, just type into Google like Christmas icons, and it'll show a whole ton of things that you can choose from. Okay, so there's my tree. Now the candy cane. Some of my stripes got a little obscured when they dried, so I'm gonna do a little outline on this and try to pull some of them out a little bit more. And I'm also going to darken some of the details on those starlight mints as well. And I like how this is looking, but I think I'm going to add another dark detail color. So I want to think about what that color will be. I think I want it to be like a dark blue-gray, similar to the color that I used in the whipped cream on the mug, maybe just a little bit darker. All right, so I'm bringing out the details in these mints, and then I need to add their little wrappers also. That will really identify them. All right, so I'm going to go back to the whipped cream here, and now that it's dry, I'm going to add some more lines. Not everywhere, but just in a few places to give it some emphasis. And I like this color, so I'm going to use this as like my third or fourth accent color, and add some more details with this to all of my different objects. Whenever you use a color in a painting, you want to try to provide balance with it. So in other words, you want to use it in a couple different places in your painting. So I gave my little socks some stripes. And this will be a nice color to use also, I think, for the little wrappers of my mints. So I'm just putting some little polka dots on my mittens. That looks cute. Polka dots are a timeless pattern that you can always turn to if you need to make something look more interesting. Yeah. I think that looks nice because we've got the the light blue background, and then this is like a few shades darker and slightly more gray. And I really like how these colors are going together, so I'm gonna add a skinny stripe of this blue-gray in between my white and my red. That could have gone all wrong, but I really like how that looks. And I think I am getting close to being done. Need to add these little plastic wrappers, and so I'm just kind of giving them a general outline. This is more of a designy-ish painting, so I'm not really worried about making it look very realistic. And I think in this case, less is more. You know, I'm just trying to give the idea of these candies. Okay, so I like all my icons there, but I still feel like there needs to be something in these extra white spaces. Something that I can repeat but tie them together, and that will kind of unify the whole painting. So I'm gonna do these little berries, these wintry berries, in a slightly more orange red color. And I think they will just have those dark gray blue stems. And so that's a really handy thing to use to kind of fill up space, is some kind of organic shape, some kind of leaf, flower, berry. It's just real handy. Something that you can easily repeat, but each time you paint it, it's going to look slightly different. And I like how that looks. So I'm gonna do just my last little touches. I want to darken this tree, make it stand out on this mug a little bit more, at least one side of it. And then I think I will also add just a couple more dark lines to the little pom-pom on the hat. I really like how that blue bled into the top of the hat, and I just want to emphasize the lines of that with the darker color. Thanks everybody for joining me.